They say some evils hide in plain sight, not with rage or blood, but with kindness, silence, and trust. This is the kind of evil no one expects, the kind that moves in quietly and stays. In November 2023, a 74-year-old woman named Annette Smith vanished from her charming flat in Bedfordshire, England. There were no signs of forced entry, no cries for help, only eerie silence, vague text messages, and Christmas cards that didn't quite sound like her. For nearly 2 months, her friends and family believed she had simply taken time away. But something wasn't right. Her stepson knew it. Her ex-husband felt it. And deep down, her community feared it. What investigators would eventually discover behind a locked storage unit was beyond disturbing. Not just a murder, but a betrayal, a carefully planned deception. A body disposed of with cold precision, not by a stranger, but by the man she had once saved. This is the horrifying true story of Annette Smith, and how trusting the wrong person turned a quiet life into one of Britain's most chilling crimes of 2023. Welcome. This is Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so to stay updated on the latest crimes we uncover. Who was Annette Smith? Annette Smith lived the kind of life that didn't make headlines. She didn't chase fame or fortune. Instead, she surrounded herself with simplicity, kindness, and dignity. Her flat was nestled inside Fairfield Hall, a stunningly restored Victorian building in the Bedfordshire village of Stotfold. Once an asylum, the estate had been converted into stylish, self-contained homes, ideal for retirees, professionals, and independent spirits like Annette. At 74, Annette still enjoyed the small luxuries of life, hosting quiet dinner parties, solving crossword puzzles, and tending to the courtyard garden she shared with neighbors. With her neat silver-blonde hair, pressed cardigans, and soft demeanor, she stood out not for her wealth, but for her grace. She wasn't wealthy, but she was generous, with her time, her home, and her warmth. Over the years, she built a circle of friends through church groups, walking clubs, and Sunday conversations over tea. Her relationships were real, lasting, and rooted in mutual respect. Annette was still in regular touch with her stepson, Jason, and she often exchanged messages and holiday cards with extended family and old friends. She had been married to Peter Smith, Jason's father, until their separation in 2004. But even after the split, they remained amicable, co-owning the flat, sharing financial responsibilities, and occasionally checking in on each other's lives. But time changes things. In 2018, Annette suffered a stroke. She survived, and she could still live independently, but her body had slowed down. Her right side grew weaker. Her walks became shorter. Stairs became harder. Her confidence wavered. She had always prided herself on self-reliance, paying her own bills, cleaning her own space, keeping her mind sharp and her world tidy. But now, she found herself needing help. And help came in the form of a man she once called a gentle giant. His name was Scott Paterson. It started, like many tragedies do, with a small act of kindness. Annette first met Scott Paterson at a local pub restaurant where he worked. He was hard to miss, tall, broad-shouldered, polite, the kind of man you'd call helpful before you knew him. Annette had known him briefly years earlier, and when she saw he'd fallen on hard times after a breakup, she didn't turn him away. Instead, she opened her home. At first, it was a mutual exchange, a simple agreement. He could live in her home, rent-free, in return for helping around the house. Errands, light cleaning, a friendly presence. She was aging. He needed a place to stay. It made sense. And at first, he delivered. Scott helped carry her shopping bags. He picked up her medication from the pharmacy. He took out the bins, kept the kitchen tidy, and even warmed her towels after baths. He wasn't pushy. He wasn't loud. He was simply there, like an appliance you trust until it sparks. They took occasional trips together, shared quiet dinners. He even signed Christmas cards. Annette began to call him dependable, a blessing, her gentle giant. But beneath the calm was a man with a past. Scott had picked up part-time work at a nearby farm shop, slicing deli meats and assisting at the butcher's counter. He even completed a short butchery course, which at the time seemed practical, even commendable. No one imagined it would become relevant in a homicide investigation. As weeks turned into months, Scott's presence in Annette's life deepened. He took over more and more tasks: cooking, laundry, prescriptions. He made himself useful, indispensable even, but there were cracks, quiet ones. Annette, once lively and witty, grew more withdrawn. Her home, once neat and cheerful, began to lose its shine. Her joy dimmed. Her interactions, even with her closest friends and stepson, became more limited. Jason, her stepson, noticed, not all at once but in small shifts, the tone in her voice, her absence from church, the garden not quite as tended. It wasn't alarming yet, but it didn't feel right either. And then it happened. It was early November 2023 when Annette Smith vanished. Not with a scream, not with a crash, just silence. The last confirmed sighting of her came from a neighbor who believed they saw Annette through her front window around November 8th. Maybe she waved. Maybe she just stood there. But after that moment, nothing. No more chats in the garden. No more calls. No more Annette. First, Jason assumed she was busy. It wasn't unusual for her to retreat for a few days. She wasn't glued to her phone. She wasn't a woman of routine check-ins. But weeks passed, and something felt off. Then came the Christmas cards. They arrived right on time, each one from Annette. But they didn't feel like her. There were too many kisses, oddly formal messages, and a stiffness in the words that didn't match her usual warmth. Emails followed. Cold, robotic, strangely brief. One family member said it felt like reading a message from a chatbot. Something was missing. Her rhythm, her personality, her presence. But still, no one panicked. Not yet. That changed when Peter Smith, Annette's ex-partner and co-owner of her flat, decided to drop by. When Peter arrived, he let himself in. What he found felt frozen in time, not chaotic, not ransacked, but eerie. There was food in the fridge, water in the kettle, Annette's wallet still in her handbag, her puzzle book unfinished, and her medications untouched. Nothing suggested she'd packed for a trip. Nothing hinted she was planning a getaway. The police, at first, weren't concerned when reached. Annette was an adult. Maybe she needed space. But Peter and now Jason were done waiting. With each passing week, concern hardened into quiet fear. There was no sound from Annette. No phone calls. No spontaneous notes. Only typed emails and printed cards. Lifeless echoes of a woman who had once been warm and unmistakably herself. The Christmas cards were the first red flag. Not handwritten, not personalized, just neatly printed Moonpig cards, a UK service that lets users create and mail cards online. Every message was formatted generic, too polished. There were no personal touches, no inside jokes, just a time-stamped illusion. Then came the excuses. Every time Jason called, it was Scott who picked up. He offered vague explanations like, "She's just away with a friend," or "She needed a break," but he couldn't say where she'd gone, or with whom, or why she hadn't called her own family. It was all too neat and too empty. Then, on New Year's Day, the final message came. An email claiming Annette was thinking of everyone, that she'd reach out soon. But something in Jason snapped. He knew that voice, and this wasn't it. What he was reading wasn't Annette. Not anymore. Peter was thinking the same thing. He'd shared a life with her, and he could feel it in his bones. She was gone. Not on holiday, not taking a break. Gone. But the police were still hesitant. So Peter did what many desperate people do when institutions fail. He turned to a private investigator. The detective's visit to the flat changed everything. No noise, no movement, kettle out of use, half-dried dishes, a crossword puzzle waiting for answers that would never come, her clothes untouched, her pills collecting dust, the heat turned low, and then her laptop, still logged in, still receiving emails, and someone from inside that house was opening them. Annette wasn't just missing. Someone was living in her home, pretending to be her. After that quiet, careful visit. The private investigator made just one chilling remark to Peter. "This doesn't feel like someone who planned to leave." Within hours, everything changed. Bedfordshire police returned to Fairfield Hall. This time, not for a wellness check, but with forensics gear and a cadaver dog. What had once been overlooked was now under a microscope. And the house that had seemed undisturbed began to reveal its secrets. In the bathroom cabinet, beneath a green blanket, a faint reddish-brown stain was discovered. At first glance, it could have been anything, but under the right light, it spoke volumes. Then came the cupboard under the stairs. The dog handler paused at the threshold. The trained sniffer, silent for most of the search, suddenly froze, alert. The signal was clear. There had been a body there. Still, no remains had been found. No body, just a scent, a trail, a suspicion turning into certainty. With pressure mounting, Scott Paterson was brought back in for questioning. This time, it wasn't a polite conversation. It wasn't gentle. It was a homicide investigation. Detectives expected resistance, a lie, a scramble for an alibi. But what they got was a confession. Under the sterile brightness of the interview room, Scott Paterson sat motionless, hands folded, face unreadable. No lawyers, no delays, just a strange, heavy calm. Before officers could even begin formal questioning, Scott broke the silence. "I killed someone," he said. "I killed Annette." The words were flat, unshaken, like he was reading from a grocery list. What followed was a confession that chilled even seasoned detectives. Scott admitted he'd entered her bedroom on the night of November 8th, waited until she was fast asleep, and placed a pillow over her face. She didn't struggle for long, he claimed. When her breathing stopped, he left her there, in the same bed she had once offered him out of compassion. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He talked to her body. He sat there for hours. Then he began to plan. Over the following days, Scott moved Annette's body, first beneath the stairs, where the scent lingered long after. But when a real estate agent visited to take property photos, he grew nervous. He knew she couldn't stay there, so he wrapped her in blankets, sealed her in a black suitcase, and drove 3 miles to a storage unit in Letchworth Garden City. There, he left her, alone, in the dark, inside a rented locker under his real name. No fake IDs, no cover stories, just cold arrogance. He confessed he had used tools from the farm shop, where he once worked, to dismember her body. His butchery skills, once used for meat counters, were now used for something unthinkable. And all the while, he continued living. He sent Christmas cards from her name. He answered her phone. He even sold her jewelry online, profiting over £5,000 while her remains sat locked away in silence. He thought he could get away with it. "I didn't think they'd find her," he told police. "If there was no body, there'd be no case. But there was a body, and it was about to be found." Detectives moved quickly after Scott's confession, wasting no time locating the storage unit he described in Letchworth Garden City. When they arrived, the staff at the facility were shocked. Scott had rented the unit under his real name. No false documents, no effort to conceal his identity, and every visit had been captured on CCTV, clear as day. Officers opened the unit. Inside was a black suitcase, tightly wrapped in layers of plastic sheeting and green blankets. The smell hit them before they even unzipped it, the unmistakable stench of death. Inside, they found the dismembered remains of Annette Smith. Scott hadn't just killed her, he had taken her apart. Investigators found body parts stored separately within the suitcase, carefully wrapped in towels, plastic bags, and duct tape. It was methodical, deliberate, not a crime of panic, but of calculation. The tools he had used, a saw and sharp butcher's implements, had come from his part-time job at the local farm shop. That butchery course he had taken years before, now reinterpreted as something far more sinister. And as detectives combed through his digital footprint, the horror only deepened. They found emails sent from Annette's laptop, composed and sent by Scott from within her own flat. They found Moonpig card orders, paid for with her own bank card, addressed to her friends and family. They found her jewelry sold online for a few £1,000s, as if her life could be pawned off like a trinket. All while she lay inside that storage locker, just a few miles from the home she once shared with the man who ended her life. The courtroom was still when Scott Paterson stood to face judgment. There were no outbursts, no tears, just a man who had quietly murdered the woman who once saved him, now offering no excuses, only empty admissions. At Luton Crown Court, Scott pleaded guilty to the murder of Annette Smith. He didn't try to justify it. He didn't offer a motive. He simply admitted in flat tones that he'd thought about it twice before, standing silently outside her bedroom door on 2 earlier occasions, before walking away. But on November 8th, he didn't walk away. The judge called it what it was, a betrayal of the highest order. You killed a woman who gave you shelter, food, trust, and you did so not in rage, but in cold calculation, the judge said. You suffocated her in her sleep, hid her body, and went on with your life as if nothing had happened. Prosecutors detailed the extent of Scott's cover-up. The lies he told Jason and Peter, the Christmas cards, the digital footprints left like stains, the way he used her trust to silence her forever. Jason Smith, Annette's stepson, stood before the court and delivered a victim impact statement that left the room in tears. He described the violation, the sorrow, the disbelief, that the man who had once helped his mother bathe and dress had also plotted her death. Peter Smith, her former partner, said the pain was still raw, like waking every day into a nightmare that wouldn't end. In November 2024, Scott Paterson was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 20 years before eligibility for parole. A quiet M****, now locked away. The verdict gave the family what the law calls justice, but what Annette's loved ones felt was something else entirely. A sentence can't replace a life. A confession doesn't undo the silence she endured. And no prison cell can truly contain the damage Scott Paterson left behind. Annette Smith wasn't just a victim. She was a woman of dignity, of thoughtfulness, of quiet strength. She loved garden walks and crosswords, dinner parties and handwritten cards. She offered shelter to someone who needed help, and in return, he extinguished her light. Her family described her in one final, quiet tribute. She was kind, trusting, graceful. She loved freely, and what happened breaks our hearts. Even today, her friends still speak about her in the present tense, as if letting go of her memory means letting him win. Her flat in Fairfield Hall has long been cleared out. The garden still grows, but the space where she once stood, cheerful and elegant, feels colder now, like something's missing, and always will be. And perhaps the most chilling truth is this: Scott didn't shout. He didn't rage. He didn't explode. He planned. He waited. He pretended. He lived with her. He cared for her. And then one night he took her life and quietly erased the evidence. But in the end, the truth still rose, as it always does, because no matter how neat the emails were, no matter how perfect the Christmas cards looked, there was one thing he couldn't forge: Annette's voice. She had gone silent, but her absence spoke louder than anything he could write. Thank you for watching. Every victim deserves their story told. If you found this story shocking and heartbreaking, subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. What do you think about Annette's murder? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning everything.